Well, thank you. I'm Matt Weiner. For those of you who don't know me, I'm visiting here at the law school this year, teaching administrative law and federal courts and co-teaching with Professor Colonisi, the popular year-long course, Regulatory Law and Policy, whose students are with us here today. And I'm also serving with Professor Colonisi as the co-faculty advisor of the regulatory review. Just a note on our sponsors today. This program is sponsored by the Penn Program on Regulation and the Regulatory Review. Founded and directed by Professor Colonisi, the Penn Program on Regulations promotes regulatory excellence by shedding light on how regulation and regulatory institutions work in practice and whether they can be better managed to achieve their objectives. The program brings together more than 60 affiliated faculty and researchers from across the country, and it has no counterpart at any other university in the United States. Affiliated with the Penn Program on Regulation, the Regulatory Review is the leading online source of regulatory news, analysis, and opinion. Its content comes from scholars, judges, lawyers, regulatory experts, and not least the staff, the Penn Law students who comprise its staff, and nearly all of them are here today, if not all of them. Now to our historic program, the last of the independents, and let me just emphasize that a question mark appears at the end of the title. I think it, hopefully it does. Yes, it does. A question mark appears at the end of the title. Today's program could not be any more timely. Just next month, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in Trump versus Slaughter, named after the president and one of our panelists, Rebecca Kelly Slaughter. That may well answer the question that the title of today's panel presents. That is, the court will decide whether to overrule its nearly century-old decision in Humphrey's Executor versus Federal Trade Commission. That is the decision in which the court ruled that Congress may, consistent with the Constitution's separation of powers, limit the president's power to remove the members of the Federal Trade Commission without cause. It is the for-cause protection enjoyed by an agency's head or agency heads that is generally thought to mark an agency as independent. If Humphrey's Executor goes, so will go the removal protections, and with it, the independent agencies enjoyed by the heads of at least several dozen federal agencies. I counted almost 40 when I did a quick count last night. Whatever your perspective on the legal question that's presented by the court, presented before the court, I think you'll agree that the loss of independence will have profound consequences for the federal regulatory system. Today's panelists are uniquely qualified and situated to tell us why. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Professor Colonisi, who, among other things, will introduce our panelists this afternoon. Professor Colonisi?
Thank you very much, Professor Weiner, and thank you for the introduction to this session today and the warm welcome. We're delighted to have everyone here. I'm delighted to welcome our panel members. Our focus today will be on what's at stake. What's at stake in the legal battles over agency independence? What will the nation lose? Or maybe the question should be, what has it already lost if some agencies lose their formal autonomy, or if Congress no longer has the ability to structure some agencies to have that autonomy from the White House? Now, out of all of the officials in the federal government that have faced removal actions over the last 10 months, and there have been many, many more than there would normally be in a transition to a new administration, we've been fortunate to bring together these 9. I want to just highlight that there's something they all have in common. They're the heads of federal or national independent agencies. This is not going to be a conversation about firing of inspector generals or line prosecutors or lower-ranking military leaders, even the members of the Puerto Rico Oversight Board, which is very local or regional focus, and not about removal actions that have been taken against Library of Congress officials, including the U.S. Copyright Office. These are individuals who've served at the highest levels of public service in independent agencies. That is, those agencies where the statutes creating them are understood to provide that the heads of those agencies can only be removed for cause. Many federal agencies, the heads of those agencies serve at the pleasure of the president. They can be removed at will. Independent agencies cannot. We're hoping that what we'll have today is a conversation among the panel members for about the first hour, and then there will be time toward the end for you to come forward to the microphones in the front and ask your own questions. All of the panel members have very distinguished careers. And in the interest of time, I'm going to dispense with the customary reading of biographies. We've got 9 panel members, and we could be here all day with just that. But the most relevant part of each of these individuals' biography is that they all were appointed by a president and confirmed by the Senate for their position, and then they have been subjected to some kind of efforts, and we're going to hear more about what those efforts were to keep them from continuing in those positions. I'm going to refer to each of them by their first names, not as a sign of overly informal interaction or disrespect at all, but rather because the proper titles are really on one point of legal contestation right now. I may at times, just by habit or just for shorthand, use language that refers to them as having been fired or removed or no longer serving in the positions that they are. That's under legal contestation, and my shorthand is not intended to come down one way or the other on that legal question. But let's start by, I thought it'd be really helpful at the outset as a way of introducing, actually to ask each panel member to briefly introduce their agencies. And there are really, as Professor Wiener said, there are dozens of independent agencies. There's hundreds of agencies overall, and they take many different forms. And I think it will be helpful to level set this conversation to be able to see the variety of agencies that are represented here and what they do. And that too could be something that could take the entire time. So I want to ask each person, and I'll just start on my right and move down, and then we'll move on my left and move down, and ask each of you to just, in a lightning round kind of fashion, tell us what your agency does and how its independence is integral to what it does. So let me start on my immediate right with Becca Slaughter, Federal Trade Commission.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here with this incredibly distinguished group of public servants with whom I have worked and whom I have admired for a very long time. PEN is the first organization to get us all together. So you all sitting in this room are the first to have that opportunity, and I know we're really, really grateful for it. Federal Trade Commission was established in 1914 to protect consumers and promote competition. It's mostly a market watchdog that looks out for everyday Americans against illegal corporate conduct, including mergers, anti-competitive conduct, fraud, junk fees, and a whole panoply of other things. It's also the nation's as close as we have to a federal privacy regulator.
Susan Grundmann, Federal Labor Relations Authority.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for your warm welcome. We're really excited to be here. The Federal Labor Relations Authority oversees the labor relations of federal employees, not municipal, not state, and certainly not government contractors or private parties, which falls under the jurisdiction of Gwen's agency, the National Labor Relations Board. We are the smaller, younger version of them. That said, we have jurisdiction over 2.1 million federal employees and their unions, providing them a forum to hear their cases. And why are federal unions important? Because labor unions bring the voices from those who actually perform the work, rather than those who perform the work who have the work performed through others. We're talking about Customs and Border Patrol, the food inspectors, the people who make sure that our food is safe, and of course the air traffic controllers who see you safely home. Don't you want to know what actually happens as a practical matter on the job by somebody who actually does the job? Don't you want to know what is feasible in a job given resources and time by somebody who actually performs the work? And that's why the FLRA says in its opening statute, in its preamble, that labor organizations, yes, labor organizations and collective bargaining in the civil service are in the public interest.
Thank you, Susan. Alex Hone-Sarek, Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Thank you, and thank you again for inviting all of us here. The Consumer Product Safety Commission was created a little over 50 years ago under President Nixon to protect consumers from unreasonable risks of injury and death associated with consumer products. Think about cribs. Think about the chairs you're sitting on, the desks that you're facing. Think about bikes that you may have ridden here. All those products. You're talking about $2 trillion in products each year under the jurisdiction, with about several thousand deaths and over 10 million emergency room visits each year associated with consumer products. Not all of those are dangerous products, but things happen. But it's the agency's job to work to figure out, all right, is there actually a problem with the product? Does it need to be recalled? Do we have to take a look at setting standards for certain products because there are trend lines out there? That's what the agency fundamentally is there to do, and to educate consumers about it, and it's not doing all that these days.
Thank you, Alex. Rich Trumka, also Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Yeah, Alex and I come from the same agency, so he did the hard work for me of describing it. But I'll walk you through how we do those things. How do we keep you safe from dangerous consumer products? We've got people at the airports and seaports across the country seizing things that shouldn't come into the country to stop it before it gets here. Recalls. Any recalls that aren't food, drugs, cosmetics, or cars, they came through our agency. And the most important way we do it is rules that make entire product categories safer. Some of the work I'm proudest of that Alex and I worked on in our time was infant sleep rules. And we did a whole series of rules because there's 3,600 infant sleep deaths in the country. We wanted to make sure we took products out of contributing to those. So there's no more incline sleepers like the Rock and Play. There's no more crib bumpers. There's no more infant support cushions or nursing pillows that are too soft to have a baby laying in them. And the sad thing is we had about a dozen solutions like those, not on infant safe sleep, on other products. We had a dozen at the finish line that have now been yanked out from under us and that aren't gonna go forward. We also did research and education, and that's being yanked away too. They canceled our research contracts and that's not going forward anymore. And as to independence, I always felt that it was implicit, unquestioned, and I never got a single call from the White House asking me anything about my substantive work.
Thank you, Rich. Lightning fashion now, we'll go on my left to Kathy Harris, Merit Systems Protection Board.
So, hi all, thanks for having me here. I'm really enjoying being with people in the same boat as me. The Merit Systems Protection Board, it's gonna sound a little bit ironic given what's happened to everybody here, but it's supposed to protect the merit system in the civil service. It grew out of the Civil Service Commission when the Civil Service Commission was broken up into parts, we became the court that adjudicated cases for federal employees who were fired for, amongst other things, political partisan reasons. We also heard appeals from whistleblowers within the federal government. And essentially, we're there to protect people from being fired unreasonably.
Thank you, Kathy.
Work needs to be done.
Todd Harper, next, National Credit Union Administration.
Like everybody else, thank you for having us, and also too, it's good to be back. This time not as a pupil of yours, but as a peer of yours here at this table. For those of you who don't know, I took legal research from Carrie back when I was in grad school, and it served me very well. Briefly, the National Credit Union Administration. Credit unions are member-owned financial cooperatives that are not for profit. And right now, the NCUA oversees 4,400 federally insured credit unions. They together have $2.4 trillion in assets, so not a small part of the financial system, but a real part of our financial system. And there are 144 million account holders. And basically what the NCUA does is works to make sure that credit unions remain safe and sound and solvent, that people have trust in the system. We protect consumer rights. We also protect their deposits.
Thank you very much. Gwen Wilcox, National Labor Relations Board.
Yes, and I agree with everyone. So I'm so glad to be here with everyone today, to meet those who are been faces for me, for many of you, and now really, I think we've developed friendships through this process. So thank you. And so I worked for the National Labor Relations Board. It was a statute that went into effect in 1935 because there was a lot of labor unrest, and this was a way to create an agency that would be able to be independent and to resolve disputes. And so the disputes apply to mainly private sector employees who have the right to organize and to join unions and to bargain collectively with their employers, and which also requires the employers to bargain in good faith with the union. It also enforces the right of most private sector unionized or non-unionized employees to engage in concerted activities for mutual aid and protection, mainly to talk about, be protected about their work-related issues. We often get confused with the Department of Labor, which, enforces many laws, but we enforce the National Labor Relations Act.
Thank you, Gwen. Hampt Dellinger, Office of Special Counsel.
Well, speaking of confusion, my office had nothing to do with Jack Smith or any special prosecutors at the Justice Department involved in one-off investigations. My formerly independent watchdog agency was established in 1978 and had a couple of core missions. One, we would promote merit system principles in the federal workforce. Two, we would look to protect whistleblowers among federal employees from retaliation once they blew the whistle. We could initiate and assess agency investigations into allegations of wrongdoing, and then we were the sole enforcer of the Hatch Act. And I don't think my former agency works if it's not independent, which is why I am saying, and not lightly, that I think it should be abolished. If you're controlled by the White House, you can't enforce the Hatch Act against the White House. If you have whistleblowers who are blowing the whistle on high-ranking government officials, including White House officials, and your agency is ultimately controlled by the White House, you cannot do anything effective, and I think it's better if it doesn't do anything at all.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least on our panel today, Travis LeBlanc, Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board.
Thank you very much, Carrie, and I am doubly honored to be here today. On the one hand, about a couple decades ago, I also was a pupil of Carrie and his research assistant at Harvard University. And so it's real thrilled to be back here with you and to see everything that you're doing.
I didn't drop the H-bomb.
also an honor to be here with 8 other patriots. Patriots who are standing for the rule of law. Not for each of us on our own, but for the rule of law. And it's much harder than you might think, even though we're all smiling here. My name's Travis LeBlanc from the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, or the PCLOB, one of the worst acronyms in Washington, D.C. The PCLOB, by statute, is an independent agency within the executive branch that was created after a recommendation of the 9/11 Commission when the United States government was, through the Patriot Act, was amassing a massive amount of surveillance authorities. They wanted an agency that could ensure that the counterterrorism programs and activities of the United States government were balanced with privacy and civil liberties. It is a 5-person bipartisan agency, no more than 3 of whom can be from the party of the president. We literally oversee the intelligence community of the United States, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security. Most of the things that we work on are classified, and so I can't talk about them. There are some that I can, that I will highlight, looking at, say, the use of facial recognition in airports, or the massive collection of call detail records by the National Security Agency, or looking at the domestic terrorism programs and activities of the United States governments are just a few examples. I was originally nominated by President Trump, which is the irony here, and confirmed to this. I was actually nominated by him twice, and confirmed to the Senate, and then renominated by President Biden for a term ending in 2028.
Can I jump in, Carrie? Because I forgot to address the point about why independence matters for the FTC, but I also want to tie some threads together. Why it matters at the FTC, and some of my colleagues up here have talked about it. The way I think about it can best be boiled down to a single image, and the image I'm talking about is the one from the inauguration where you saw President Trump surrounded not by heads of state, not by public servants, but by the CEOs of the largest companies in the United States. I looked at that picture and thought, wow, the FTC is in active litigation against almost every single one of those companies right now. And they are the ones flanking the president at his inauguration. And at the end of the day, what I think all Americans both want and need is to believe that the laws of the United States will be administered without fear or favor, and specifically without fear of getting fired for failure to do a favor for the president's political allies and donors. And when I think about that picture and I look at this group of people, that is what is most deeply encapsulated. There are 2 threads that you heard between the types of agencies we have. Some of us work more in the economic market regulation space, like the FTC, like the CPSC, NCUA. And I think I would put Gwen's agency in there too. And some of us work more in the oversight space, providing accountability. But all of that is about accountability and transparency in the operation of government in service of the law, the rule of law being administered without fear or favor. And then the last point I just want to make is independence is not something that we individually chose because we thought it was the right policy choice. It is something that Congress passed into statute for every single one of our agencies. If the president and Congress decide that that's not the right model for any of these agencies, there is a very well-tried mechanism for changing that. Bicameralism and presentment, right? You learn about it at the very beginning, hopefully before you even got to law school. And they can change.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah, Schoolhouse Rock, right? Like my 7-year-old knows about it. You can change the law. You cannot and should not, by fiat, change what the law says. The Take Care Clause says that the president has an obligation to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, not to rewrite the laws to serve his policy preferences. And I think that is the principle that all of us are working in service of and continuing to work in service of.
Can I play devil's advocate with you, though?
Yeah.
I'm going to argue the other side. Well, all you law students know you have to be able to argue both sides. The concept that the president can shape policy by naming designees and filling vacancies in all our various agencies works. However, that assumes that the party in the White House also controls the Senate. There's the reality of the Senate confirmation process. Case in point, my predecessor, good man, FLRA, nominated, renominated, reconfirmed for over 12 years. But because at the beginning of the Biden administration, there was only a one-seat majority in the Senate, he never made it through confirmation. Therefore, we had, at that point, a Democratic president, a Democratic chairman, and a majority of Republicans at the FLRA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very real thing, and it happens, and my CPSC colleagues lived it in the other direction at the beginning of this year. It's happened across agencies. Look, like Travis, I was originally nominated by President Trump and confirmed by a Republican Senate, and then I was renominated by President Biden and confirmed in a Democratic Senate. But the way that the workaround for that not workaround, but the work through to ensure that the statutory appointments laws were followed involved the work of Congress to find compromise packages. Both times I was confirmed, it was in a package with Republican nominees. And in 2024, it was 2 Republicans and me confirmed together. That is the result of trying to serve the collective interests and the statutes that are governing them. I think nobody is arguing that the president shouldn't be able to shape policy. My argument is just that he should only be able to shape policy consistent with the laws that were duly passed by Congress and signed by this or former presidents, and that is what the laws require right now. And if they don't work because you can't get people confirmed, that's a good excuse for Congress to change the laws.
And can I, generally speaking, almost all of the agencies, not every single one that's here, are multi-member agencies, averaging 5 members in the agency, almost all of which I think would have a policy that says the president can always have 1 more seat on the agency. So when fully staffed, the party in power, the president in the executive branch, they have the ability to make whatever decision the majority believes in. We're the minority, by and large, in all of these. We actually, we get a vote just like everyone else, but at the end of the day, the president's party still does have the power to make the decisions they want and control the agency. This is actually getting rid of the minority.
Maybe it's Todd and then Kathy.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we're the odd duck. We're only 3 people at the National Credit Union Administration. And I actually, first of all, I was confirmed under Trump. I was renominated by Biden and for a full term. I had the unique pleasure of leading an agency with 2 Republicans and I, the only Democrat, for 3 years under the Biden administration. And we were able to get things done. And that's because we worked and talked and worked through the policy issues in a good way. And going to Becca's point, that's the policy making and the law being interpreted and being followed as it should be followed.
Kathy?
So we're also a 3-member agency. And it's, first of all, our terms are staggered by statute so that you have as the natural course that things will turn over and you can maintain bipartisanship. It's also bipartisan by statute. You can have no more than 2 members of the same party at any one time. And as a adjudication body, a court, what I can say is that about 90, I don't know, somebody did the statistics, 98% of the time, we had unanimous decisions. There were rarely any dissents because civil service law is just not that controversial. I know that's hard to believe. And it seems extremely exciting to all of you sitting here today. But it's just not that difficult to come to the correct decision. But I think what it gave to the civil service as a whole and the American people is because we were bipartisan, people knew that we weren't making decisions based on fear or favor or based on political partisanship, right? We were doing it according to law. And as someone who was brainwashed in law school and probably before that to believe in the rule of law, and I hope all of you still do, it's just like very depressing to see that this is being challenged and undone. So that's, I think, very difficult, for me, thinking I was gonna do good and, I still want to do good and all those things. And for those of you who want to go into public service, please don't give up, because we need you. We need future people who are willing to fight for the rule of law and fight for these kinds of good government agencies.
Thank you, Kathy. Gwen?
Yeah, and I would just add to what Kathy said, that the NLRB has five members, entitled to 5 members, and we also have staggered terms. My term was scheduled to end in August of 2028, and there were 2 other board members at the time that the previous chair term ended in December of 2024. So that left us with 3 board members. So we could have functioned with 3 board members, and the president then had the right to then ask, to seek the nomination of 2 additional board members. But instead, by removing me, we went the board went to a 2-member board, and the agency has come to a halt. There cannot be any decisions. But the system has worked for 90 years, that there's always been a way in which either party, whoever's in the White House, then has the right to, if there are vacancies, fill vacancies. We were left with the fact that the Republicans in December, when their last board member left in December of 2022, they did not present a candidate to fill a slot. So we went down to 4 board members, then we went down to 3 board members when the Democratic chair's term was up, and then we're down to now 2. The board's down to 2 when I was removed, unlawfully removed, and then they're down to 1 board member. So the agency cannot issue any decisions concerning unfair labor practices, anything about elections. If a union wins the election, ultimately the board cannot certify that decision if there's any type of dispute. So the process has worked for 90 years, and the presidents have had the voice of being able to nominate and have board members confirmed throughout this process.
And let me shift gears a bit here, but also just clarify too that in all of these agencies, the statutes do allow a president to remove someone, but the president is required to show cause, or only remove when there is good cause, negligence, criminality, those sorts of things.
Well, mine
rather
said
than-
malfeasance in office. So I always like to point that out.
The wording.
Or you can be malfeasant out of office.
Yes, we got it.
But
In
that's
office.
different than just for any reason or for no reason whatsoever.
And someone defined that phrase for me in layman's terms, and said that if you are sober and on the job and trying, then you should not be able to be removed. It's the
bar.
greatest protection available.
At least
to
sober
federal
in office. Yes, exactly.
So this actually leads to the next question that I want to invite you to talk about. I mentioned before, all of you went through a nomination process. The president nominated you, a Senate confirmation process to be appointed to your position. That much is sort of common and well known. But I think what's less well known is how this White House took steps to remove you. What was the quote-unquote removal process, and how did it unfold for you? And I invite you to share your own stories about what you thought when you first received some notice. And maybe I want to turn to Todd first.
Yeah, the removal process was not anything I had experienced nor expected. It was April 15th. I was in the hospital room for my partner. We had been together 33 years. He was in the final 5 weeks of his life. and I got a call from Tanya Otska, who is one of my fellow board members who was purportedly removed. And I say purportedly removed because we have one at the DC Circuit level. We're now pending appeal. And I got a call from Tanya, and Tanya said, have you checked your email? And I said, no, why? She said, well, I just got an email from the White House Personnel Office saying I've been fired. And I checked my email, and there was nothing there. And I happened to have a sleep test that night at 8 o'clock. I went down to take that sleep test, and what do? You turn off your phones. And as far as I knew, I was still on the NCUA board. Well, at 6 o'clock, that sleep test ended, and I got up, and I went and turned on my phone, and it didn't work. And then I went home and turned on my computer, and it didn't work. And then I got confirmation that I had indeed been fired, but there was still no email. It took them 2 days to produce the email. They had sent it to the wrong email address. I say that because what I experienced was both Callus and Keystone Cops simultaneously. And I think that all of us, it was a haphazard process that we experienced, and I know that others have somewhat, maybe not as dramatic experiences as I do, but also they were at kids' events and whatnot.
I mean, I can jump in there with my story first. I just want to extend enormous sympathies to Todd, because what an awful thing to go through in the middle of an awful thing that you were already going through. And I think the reason it's important to highlight that is everybody working for the federal government is a person, right? Yep. All of us, we're political appointees, we're people, all of the civil servants who many at this table worked very hard to protect are people. And these things are happening to real people in ways that are really quite devastating. I had worked a full day, it was March 18th. I had worked a full day at the office, had actually met with a whole bunch of FTC staff. I did regular check-in meetings with them just to hear from them. What's on their mind? What do I need to know about? How can I better execute my responsibilities by understanding the opportunities and challenges that they were facing? And at the end of the day, I left and raced to the elementary school where I was helping out with my kids' drama club production, which is 80 children in grades 3 through 5, and it was Tech Week, which if you do theater is like a big deal, and if you are little children, it is a loud big deal. And I was sitting outside the rehearsal room, and I looked at my email, and I had an email from the Presidential Personnel Office also purporting to fire me. I think an important detail is the last time an FTC commissioner or a commissioner at any of our agencies was fired was when President Roosevelt fired Commissioner Humphrey from the Federal Trade Commission, and when he fired him, the note he said was, I think your mind and my mind do not go together on matters of the FTC, right? Decidedly not for cause. Commissioner Humphrey litigated, won, died, but won posthumously. And what was striking to me about the email I received was that it included not the same language, but a similar, like, your service is no longer in the interests of the president, something like that. I called Alvaro Bedoya, my fellow Democratic colleague, and I said, have you checked your email? And he said, no, I'm at my daughter's gymnastics practice. I really try hard not to check my email at gymnastics because she gets real mad. And I said, you should probably check your email, because I just got an email saying I've been fired, and he did also have the same email. And then I just thought, okay, buckle up. Like, we're in it now.
So are you seeing a theme here? That these things come as emails in the darkness of night, right?
Yeah.
But let me say one thing, and Rebecca mentioned this beforehand when we were all meeting. We are props. None of us take any of this personally. And if we were to take this personally, we'd be in the wrong business. Now, having said that, telling you a story. No journalist wants to be the story. And for all you law students out there, no attorney ever wants to be the client. That said, same thing, email in the darkness of night. The irony was, in my case, that the president had the authority to remove me as chairman on day 1 of his job. He chose not to do so. He left me there for weeks implementing his policies, which is a different story altogether. But when he finally got around to removing me as a member, he still did not designate my Republican colleague as the chairman. But in a word, how did I feel? I think there was sorrow, But on my end, it was relief. Having seen what happened with Hamp, with Gwen, with the commissioners at the EEOC, it was like the Damocles sword, right? It is dangling over my head. I knew it was coming, I just didn't know when.
I would just say, I think I was the first first person to be removed on January 27th. And I, every day was thinking like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The general counsel for the NLRB, Jennifer Abruzzo, knew that her term, that she would be getting a letter at some point. And the rules with regard to general counsels are different than for board members. But on January 27th at 10:38 p.m., I was checking my emails, God knows why, but I guess it was good that I was. And there was an email from the White House. The letter was not well written and it had a lot of confusing information about what my job was or what my title was. It just varied from line to line. But it was very clear that, there was no evidence. They acknowledged that malfeasance or neglect of duty are the reasons by which they can remove a board member, but they didn't allege that. They alleged, they clearly stated that it was because I did not share the same, let me just say properly, we don't share the same objectives of his administration. And so, I wasn't shocked, but I was surprised and disappointed because most importantly, it's really the agency and the work that we do that is very important. And we all as public servants are there because we believe in the mission of our agencies. And so the next morning I spoke to, the administration, director of administration, told her I received the email, and in a matter of moments after sending an email to my staff, I no longer had computer access. So it's, what's so upsetting about how they do it is that they don't really care about the agency. They don't really care about the work that we do, and just the personal sacrifices that anyone who works for the government has to do, or any job that we have, whether it's in the private sector. We care about the jobs that we work and what we do. And so to just all of a sudden not have that opportunity to really close out your cases and figure out what the next steps will be, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go down to Rich.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't surprised when they came for us. We still had a Democratic majority into May, and we were using it for good. We had just put out a rule to go after lithium-ion battery fires from e-bikes. It was killing people and burning down apartment buildings. And when we did that, we ignored the illegal executive orders that we thought did not legally apply to independent agencies. We didn't submit it to OIRA. We didn't do 10 rules out for the one in. And we didn't have a Trump-approved agency head yet. And so those all, butted up against some executive orders that we thought didn't apply. We had just declared very loudly and very publicly, all three of us, that we wouldn't fire a single person at our agency because we had the funds available to pay everybody on staff, and we needed everybody. We're a lean agency as it is. And we had hours before, maybe less than an hour before, just said Doge can't come into our building. And so I did that, and then I left. I went to meet with some consumer advocates off-site in the evening, and we were talking about some products that we had concerns about. And I got a call from my colleague, Mary Boyle, and I put it back in my pocket because I was meeting, but I got another call and a text. And so I stepped out and picked it up, and she said the same thing. Did you just get an email? And I said, I don't know. I didn't have any of my equipment with me. I couldn't get to my email. So finished my meeting, went out to dinner with some friends. And then about 10:30 or 11, my curiosity got the best of me, and I went back to the office and checked my email and had gotten the same one sentence from some low-level functionary in the White House saying that, thanks for your service.
Did it actually say thanks for your service?
It's a
Yeah.
thanks for
Yeah,
your
mine
service,
did.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, but for a little while.
Sorry, Becca.
I don't remember. That, if it was there, it did not stand out to me.
But
Well, I had it, but I didn't think they meant it.
Travis?
But I appreciated my few hours when I was out at dinner as Schrodinger's commissioner. I was like, I'm both there and not there. But also, as an aside on all this, as we think about the human effect of this, I've got 2 young kids. My kids at the time were 8 and 5. I still haven't told them that I was fired or whatever happened here. I did sit them down because we live in the DC area. I figured somebody might say something at school because they'd find out about it. I said, hey, do you know how Daddy's always saying he doesn't really like what the president's doing? Doesn't like how he's going about things. Well, he's trying to stop Daddy from being able to do his job and help people. And he's going after Daddy's friends at work too. And I'm going to fight back against that. I hope you're okay with it. And they said, yeah, go for it, Dad, and went right back to playing. But if any of you see my kids, don't tell them I said
Before you go to Travis, can I just share the totally opposite experience I had with my kids? Because I was at drama club in this DC area public school, and I knew that like all the people, all the parents in the school, were, many of whom had not up to that point known what I did for work, like they were gonna find out, and I was so desperate to tell my kids before they heard it from their friends' parents. So like getting to my kids first was like a mad dash for me. And in fact, all the kids, you know, it's the kids, they chit chat a lot. But at the drama club production, one of the kids, not mine, said to me like 2 days later, said, you know, Miss Becca, I heard what happened to you. I heard you got fired. And I said, yeah, it was kind of a bummer. And he said, I'm really sorry that happened. And I said, thanks, I'm also really sorry about it. And he goes, but I also heard that you're fighting back. And I said, yeah, that's true. I'm gonna do that. And he goes, we're really proud of you, Miss Becca. And I was like, whoa, weeping. Because I think the kids do pick up on what that means. And that meant a ton to me.
And if I could just jump in before we go to Travis.
We're going to make it over to you.
Yeah, Travis.
You know, Tom and I saw what was coming in December, and we had a huge fight at the house. And Tom's like, you're not going to be able to withstand the battle. You're not going to have the financial resources. I'm lucky that I have pro bono representation. Thank you, lawyers who do pro bono representation in this point in time right now. And Tom and I had this huge screaming match, and he said, you can't do it. You can't stand up. Just quit. And I was in high school, and in high school drama production, I played Dr. Sansón Carrasco, who is the villain in Man of La Mancha, who is the one who stares Don Quixote down as the Knight of the Mirrors and says, look into the reality, see the truth. And by April, Tom and I were in complete agreement, and amongst his last words were to me, keep fighting. And I am bringing that with that Dr. Sansón Carrasco role, a role as a sophomore. I was cast against type, but I do it because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Travis, now.
So it was January 21st.
Travis was
You
day
went
one.
first.
Day one.
The first business day in the administration, and I was.
You win.
And I was in a meeting with my counselor, and I got an email from an individual, Trent Morse, who purported to be at the White House. It would have been the first day. I'd never heard of this guy before. And I get an email to my government email address, as well as to a Yahoo email address for someone named Greg LeBlanc. I still have no idea who that is.
But he's fired.
Yes. In which it says, you know,
Not Greg LeMond.
Oh, Greg, okay.
Yes, maybe.
On behalf of President Trump, I am asking for your resignation within 48 hours. And if you do not resign, then the president will fire you. If, however, the president changes his mind, you'll receive a further notification. I was stunned by this message because I have no idea who this is, some random person that's out there. We now have 48 hours to figure out, and of course, just like everyone else, immediately call the other Democratic members of the board to find out if they received it. They had also received it, and what we were going to do. We all decided we weren't going to resign, and meanwhile, this part of the story has not been told. Our Republican colleague learns of this and is calling the White House and is orchestrating our removals with the White House, telling the staff that at a certain time, 5 p.m. on the Thursday, we will be removed, ordering them to stay late, to be there to shut off our email, to lock us out of our SCIF and our offices. And so there's another angle to this story, which is these multi-member agencies that many of us are part of. We have colleagues that were with us that may not have actually been there trying to support us, but actively seeking to thwart us and to remove us from our offices. And what stunned me the most about the entire experience is how hard you work to actually go through the process of becoming a presidentially appointed member of one of these commissions. It is not as if one day I got an email from the White House that says, Travis, welcome to the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Oh, no, 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 especially if the president is not the party of which you're a member. You go through a whole vetting process in the Senate, usually. For me, it was the Senate and the House. That's a different story for another day, to get approved by the leader and also the Speaker of the House, to then get your name sent over to the White House and then get vetted by the White House. I interviewed with the White House counsel. I went through the process, got nominated by the president, and then you start the Senate confirmation process, which in and of itself is quite complicated, including completing questionnaires, meeting with members and their staff, ultimately testifying before the Senate, and then you wait to go through the confirmation process on the floor. And even after you're confirmed, you don't actually become a member of the agency. The president has to sign your commission. It's the commission that gives you the ability to take your position. And that commission is duly authorized by the president. If you ever go back to Marbury versus Madison,
Just gonna say,
that is what
Marbury.
this was fundamentally about. He wanted his commission. And I have multiple commissions on my wall. I've got it signed by the president. It's large, multiple presidents signed on the wall. And it says I am entitled to serve as a member of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. It does not say I serve at the pleasure of the president. It says for a term that ends in January of whatever the date's going to be. And for all people who see this commission, you are supposed to treat me as a member of the board. It was stunning to me that an email from a random person in the presidential personnel office could purport to actually remove you without actually taking a presidential action.
So tell us how you really feel about that.
So
It's okay for Travis to go last, because he's gonna always
no.
he's gonna come in
I
hot.
haven't gone yet.
Sorry, Kathy.
We're gonna let Kathy go, and then I want to
because-
shift into another question, and then we're gonna open it up for audience
Okay, but
questions.
now the bar
Because-
has been set,
Oh,
Kathy.
don't you worry.
Okay.
Mine's boring. I got an email. It was 10:30 at night. I was asleep. I woke up, saw the email. That was that. But instead of what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you. My 9-year-old niece interviewed me for her newspaper after I was fired, and I want to read this to you. Her questions and then my answers. Favorite food? Sour cherry pie. How many people are in your family? 3 people, 3 pets. Next question. Did Trump fire you? Yes. Why? He broke the law and decided he wanted his own person in the job, but Congress passed the law and said I could not be fired, so I'm suing him in court like the baddie I am. She maybe changed my quote a little bit. How did you feel about that? I felt upset, but I knew I had to stand up and do the right thing. Courage is contagious. You know who gave me that line? Mr. Hampton Dellinger. So if I do the right thing, it might help somebody else do the right thing. Next question. Are you a witch? That's a secret. And this is how I know she's going to become a lawyer, because her next question, when did you become a witch? Before I was born. Which spell is your favorite? I said love spells. So anyway, so I just want to say, you know, I got the email. My next call was to my former law firm. I said, get the TRO ready. And we filed within 24 hours. And I never once hesitated, not once. because it was wrong and I had to do what I could to make it right. And I just couldn't look myself in the mirror. You know, I'm a litigator, I'm a lawyer. You know, I was a judge for a few minutes and, you know, you just can't let these things go. And that's why I think we're all sitting here today, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of bravery, and I just want to say, the first, you know, then I got put back in the job after the TRO, and then I got kicked out, and then I got put back in. It was like a real ping pong ball. And you know who was the first person to call me every time something bad happened? Hamp. 7 in the morning, I saw the news, Kathy, I'm so sorry. And, you know, it's been really amazing to have the support of others who've been going through the same thing. I feel really grateful. I'm really sorry this happened to all of us, but I feel really proud of myself and of all of you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to turn to something, Hamp, you were saying about your office earlier, about what difference all this makes. So we can talk about this being something that you've all experienced that, you know, has been stressful, to perhaps put it mildly, personally, but what does it mean for the country? We've talked a little bit about protecting the rule of law, but how about for the agencies you are here, you know, talking about? What difference will it make? And maybe Hampton, I mean, you want to elaborate a bit on where you were? I mean, you
Sure.
mentioned this at the outset.
And I'll just say real briefly, I got the email too, February 7th. I did equivocate and vacillate. Meanwhile, my lawyers were getting the TRO ready. But I don't know if patriot qualifies, but I just feel like I'm an American, right? And when a president of the United States tells you to do something, in all of our cases, leave your jobs, my actual first instinct, as much as I expected to get the email, was, all right, I need to do what the president says. And I truly had that reaction for a minute or two, and then I just realized, well, the president just broke the law. And so then I went back and forth, and Monday sued and had my TRO and never missed a day of work, at least for a month. Why it matters, I think in the before times, from all I can tell, all of our agencies worked in the public interest and made a meaningful difference. And so my office worked hat and glove with the inspectors general. And we did detect waste, fraud, and abuse and did something about it. And boy, was it striking to see a couple of the DOJ staffers say a couple months in, actually, there's not really that much waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. And we were making a difference for the 2.1 million federal employees are in 50 states across the country, right? You're touching on tens of millions of Americans. And the majority of federal employees don't work in the District of Columbia, Maryland, or Virginia. So being able to advocate for them and make sure that they're treated fairly really matters across the country. And I can't say it enough. 30% of federal employees, more than 600,000 Americans, are military veterans. And so, I grew up in North Carolina. We consider ourselves America's most military-friendly state. And so when I saw the president and his minions come in and disrespect federal employees, I knew they were disrespecting military vets. And that was, at the end of the day, maybe the thing that led me to fight, in addition to feeling like I had to honor 50 years of independence for this agency. But what this administration has done to military veterans is inexcusable and should never be forgotten.
Others have thoughts about what it means, Alex, for your agency. What's at stake with all of this?
So
public.
CPSC is fundamentally a health and safety organization. We're out there to try and prevent unnecessary deaths and injuries associated with that. And when Congress put the CPSC together, it's part of the legislative history. They looked to say no political influence in there. They wanted to make sure that the self-serving interests of industry was muted, as well as they put in there, the blind zeal of consumers. So they wanted to make sure that there was both balance in the commission, as well as transparency. That's especially important when you start thinking about the products that are being recalled that are out there. There are a lot of products recalled on a regular basis. Does that necessarily mean that every product gets recalled that should get recalled? Is it a product that is a company that is favored by the White House at the moment? If I was there, I could tell you. Right now, I can't tell you, and nobody else can tell you except for people who are remaining, which honestly is one individual commissioner who is not even appointed by the president to be chair. And just to answer the last question, I actually have never received notice of being removed.
So why are you here?
It's because I went in there and sat with my staff for 2 hours trying to get into my offices. I ended up calling all the chair and other people, and only through calling the personal number of one of the chair's employees was I able to get a person on the phone. And that resulted in him calling me back 20 minutes later to say that he wouldn't let me into the building.
Wow.
So they've not, I mean, the DOJ has taken position and all the rest of it and filings, so there's a position from the administration now, but the White House has never actually informed me. But going back to the independent side of things, you need multiple views. You need the transparency that's provided to be able to tell, are things being done fairly? Are some companies being favored versus other companies that are not being favored? Are there ways that we're an enforcement agency as well? Are people going after those companies or not going after those companies, and why? That's what you get when you have the ability to step away from the politics, the ability to step and look over each other's shoulders as going on, because ultimately it comes back to health and safety, which is what the agency is there to do.
If I can tack on the blunt answer to that, what it means for our agency is that people will die. And it's not hyperbole, it is fact. And I can give you numbers on that. We had rules that were at the finish line that would have saved we had a carbon monoxide poisoning rule for generators and furnaces. It would have saved over 100 lives per year every year going forward, and they've shelved that rule. Those people will die now. Keyboard dusters seem really innocuous. You use them to spray the crumbs out of the keyboard. They have toxic substances in them. We had a rule at the finish line that we would have finalized by now that would have saved over 107 lives per year every year going forward. It's been axed. Table saws, 50,000 ER trips a year from amputations and fractures and fingers. We would have eliminated those, and it would have yielded $2.32 billion in annual net benefits to society, which would have been a record for our agency. That rule shelved. The e-bike battery fire rule that I mentioned, shelved. Button batteries in toys where kids swallow them and it burns their esophagus, they end up dying, shelved. And we had a value of a statistical life rule that they have shelved, or they've rescinded it, and they've literally cut the value in half that they attribute to a child's life now. And in doing so, they make it twice as hard to pass new rules going forward. I mentioned that research is dead at our agency thanks to DOJ, and with it, it means warning the public is dead. They fired our small business ombudsman. So if you have good US companies, small businesses who want to comply with our rules, they'd call this office up, they'd say, how do we do it? We'd walk them through it. Nobody answers the phone there anymore. That office is fired. They fired half our communications department, so there's nobody to warn you about the hazards that we know about. And overall, they cut our staff by about 30%, even though we had the funding to pay every one of them. And they've crushed consumer voices at our agency. We have a statutory obligation to have a priorities hearing. Any one of you could come into our agency once a year and tell us everything on your mind that you think we ought to be working on. We learn about a lot of new problems that way, things that have led to rules, and they didn't have that this year. They fired our consumer ombudsman. So if you had an issue with the consumer product, wanted to tell us about it, there's nobody to pick up that phone anymore. They haven't had public meetings at all. They're hiding behind closed doors. And this might be the most galling. I don't know if you know about this, Alex, but we have consumer advocates who are asking, like, where in the world are these stalled rules at? Why haven't you delivered these solutions you promised? They called the chair of our agency and he said, go call OIRA and see if you can talk them into it. It's sitting over there somewhere. That's not how government's supposed to work, but that's where we're at right now.
Actually, another fun one along those lines. I've seen letters from Congress asking about the status of things at the agency, and the response has actually been to use our removal, illegal removal, as a shield, which basically says, there are things pending in court at this moment in time. We can't comment on any of the questions that you've asked.
All right, we'll take a few more answers to this question, but as we're doing so, because we have about just 15 minutes left, I want to invite anybody who would like to ask questions to come up and line up behind the microphones here at the front, and we'll get to your questions here just after a couple more responses on this point about why should the public be concerned about any of this. Kathy?
Yeah, so the opposite of the merit system, which, you may have heard is DEI, that's not correct, okay? The opposite of the merit system is the spoils system. The spoils system, political patronage, did not work out very well for our country in the past. And there's a new Netflix series now on about Charles Guiteau. I don't know if you saw, who assassinated president. That's what happens when there's political patronage, is the way that we staff our government.
And if it's on Netflix, it has to be true.
Right.
So.
But I think the point is this, putting aside the fact that what this does is it's not just giving more power to the president, it's taking away power from Congress, right? We have a balance of powers in our country. So if you're saying that the president is a unitary executive, that means you're pulling powers away from the other two branches. And Congress put us in these jobs and passed laws protecting us from being removed except for cause. And by taking that away, you're subverting the will of Congress, taking away power from Congress. And so, I just want you to think about, from a policy perspective, does it make sense to have air traffic controllers who are appointed as favors? Or do you want air traffic controllers appointed because they're the best people to do the job, right? Do you want the people taking care of our veterans in VA hospitals to be there because they're great doctors and nurses, or because they're there as a political favor? And do you want people working in these positions to be afraid that they could be removed for any reason or no reason at all because they look the wrong person in the eye, they don't look like the people who are their supervisors think they should look, they don't act like people think they should act, or just the whim of somebody in a bad mood one day? Is that really what we want our civil service to be? And so all of our agencies did lots of different things, but ultimately, I think by doing this, it's to destroy the merit system of the civil service, which I think should be a huge concern for everybody.
Which is interesting if it pans out the way they're moving it. Because say the White House changes and the White House flips, this argument now works the other way, right? So all the arguments they're making to remove us also work for us on the other side. I do want to focus on this bipartisan agency issue, because there's the assumption that because we are Democrats, we always vote with Democrats. Truth be told, at the FLRA and at the MSPB, I'm Kathy's predecessor, I listen to my Democratic colleagues, but I also listen to my Republican colleagues. And sometimes I agree with them. And I tell parties, whenever they get a decision bearing my name, that you shouldn't just flip to the back of the decision to see if you won and then commence to high-fiving your client and celebrating with your favorite adult beverage of choice. Read the decision. Read the whole decision, its analysis, its facts, its conclusions, its concurrences, and particularly its dissents. Because in our world, the dissents of today have a strong track record of becoming the majority decisions of tomorrow.
If I could just, before we jump off this question, what's at stake here is trust in the financial system. If you have a regulator that is subject to whims of a political will the people trust the institutions in which they put their money? Will they trust the notes on which you're behind? And the history of independent regulation didn't begin with us. Becca and I will both tell you, it actually goes back to the Stop the Exchequer crisis in 1672 in England, where the king refused to make payments on the debt. And that caused a major economic crisis. How did Parliament respond? They put forward a law creating the Bank of England with those barons could only be removed for cause. You fast forward to Alexander Hamilton, and who is a strong proponent of a strong executive. And what did he say? Financial regulation is different because we have to prevent these crises from happening. And what I worry about is people losing trust that their rights are going to be protected, that their interest rates are going to be fair, that they're going to get a fair loan written in a fair way, that they're not going to be conned into some financial game. And I'm also worried about what it might mean for the future when crises do occur. And I had to live through that on Capitol Hill as a staffer during the great financial crisis when I had to write legislation that helped to bail out the National Credit Union Administration because corporate credit unions had purchased faulty mortgage-backed securities, and it was going to lead to, not only to the downfall of 5 corporate credit unions, but it potentially could have led to, absent actions by the agency, the failure of 1,000+ credit unions.
Can I just add
And again, let me also invite anybody, we would have time for a question or two, so please come forward.
There you guys
Yeah,
are. I was about to say, law
we've been
students are not
filibustering here.
usually shy.
Yeah, goodness gracious. Okay, Gwen.
I felt it.
And a couple of things I just want to say that with the NLRB, right now there are decisions that are cases are waiting. People have been fired from their jobs. The whole gamut of unfair labor practices and of course elections. But one of the things, the independence, we've seen so far, the agency has seen subsequent to my removal, the fact that DOGE has come in and has access to information and of the National Labor Relations Board. So, when someone files a charge, they have to file it, they have to submit an affidavit. That's confidential. That does not get released to anyone unless there's a case that goes through a hearing and the other side gets to review the affidavit before cross-examining someone. We don't have to sign. So we don't know, they don't know where this information is going. But DOGE is not working for the agency. And also, what's also unprecedented is the fact that the president signed an executive order requiring the agency to do some type of make some decisions regarding student athletics employees as to whether they're the athletes or employees. That's unprecedented that any president has ever directed the work of the agency. So when I decided to file my lawsuit because it really is to protect the agency and to protect its independence as well as workers. And I just want to add that unlike your agency where you had to, you had others hurt, working against you and pushing you out. I didn't have that happen. It came solely from the White House, but my removal was, has been, gotten a lot of attention because this is the first time anyone has ever been removed from the agency in 90 years. And I was the first woman of color to serve in this position in 90 years. So it's, it got a lot of attention and, and that is, for some of the wrong reasons really, because the reality is I didn't get the position based upon the color of my skin. I got it because of my experience. And so, it really, decisions like this have ramifications for everyone. And, I look, we'll see what happens, but it really is, I hope that all our lawsuits are, drawing attention to the importance of the independence of the need for independence in our agency.
Okay, we have so little time left, so many questions. I'm going to ask a questioner to ask your question briefly and ask one person to answer it, okay? And then we'll see how many of these we can get through.
Speed round.
My question is for former NLRB member Will Cox. What is the long game, if you have any speculation, from the Trump admin perspective, removing you when there were seats to fill and in failing to put forward nominees because without a quorum, there's no board to undo all of those good fine board precedents. So what's the aim for that?
I'm sorry, what is the aim for?
From the long game, from the Trump administration perspective, if you have any guesses.
They've made nominations, nominated two Republicans to fill positions. I don't think they've come out of committee. I don't know whether both names are going to go forward to a vote. So there's some indication that they are going to fill the position. But it's been a while, so it's really hard to say what the next steps will be.
Okay, thank you. On the side.
Hi, my name is Nina. I wanted to ask a quick question about presidential power, even though I know this is a regulatory event, because most of us heard about you through our con law classes when we were learning about presidential power. Professor Shaw. I wanted to ask if there's any of you who could speak a little bit about your decision calculus that you went through when deciding whether to litigate, sort of as you were thinking about both the accountability that you feel to be a good example of courage, but also sort of what it might mean for legal precedent.
Anybody want to address that, or is it too close to home?
I'll try to take it really quickly.
We'll have Becca respond then.
So I think that here is my personal decision calculus. I took an oath not to the president, but to the Constitution. And I take that oath enormously seriously. And I think consistent with that oath is following through on the commitment and responsibility I had to serve out my term. In terms of the decision to litigate, I think there are questions about what kind of bad precedent you could establish, but for me, not pushing back allows that precedent to happen anyway. And so the requirement to do it, to me, felt strong. The last point I'll make is there are many people in this country who have had illegal, unfair things happen to them. Many colleagues of ours who have not been in a position financially or for other reasons to fight back. And those are really understandable decisions, right? They need to protect their families. They need to protect, maybe they're worried about immigration status. Maybe they're worried about other things. Those are very real concerns. There are also lots of people in this country who can afford to fight back and have chosen not to. And I am thinking about law firms in particular, but not just law firms. And I thought, if I can afford to do this, if I have the resources and the capacity to do it, and I choose not to, then how can I possibly get mad at those firms or those other people who are not doing it? And it's sort of what Kathy said, what Hamp said about courage being contagious. That's the thing that I hang on to.
Thank you.
Can I throw
Thank
out
you
one
for
more
that.
thing
And
for thought on that point?
Very, very short.
Sure. So
I want to try to get a couple more questions.
So Humphrey's executor is the law of the land. We're all here challenging that to say you can't get rid of us. And there's an assumption potentially that if our lawsuits just go away, the next time there's another president, they will be able to do this exact same thing. But if our cases don't move forward and there's a determination on that, that won't be the case. The Supreme Court will pretend like Humphrey's has always been the law and you can't remove folks. So we need to go forward and I think get an answer on this.
We will see what kind of answer we get in maybe 10 months or so. Yes, quick question.
Yes, well, it's actually not a question. It's just very quick thanks to the members of this panel. Prior to coming to law school, I was a civil rights officer for the FTA. I was also a probationary employee. On Valentine's Day, I was fired for performance reasons along with my probationary colleagues. We didn't have any idea what to do because it had been unprecedented. We quickly realized that the avenues for us were either MSPB appeals or OSC complaints or waiting for lawyers to come pick us up in class actions. And your leadership gave us the hope when we needed it the most during that time. So I just want to thank you for your service. And I can corroborate that your courage was indeed contagious for federal employees. Thank you.
My last question.
I should leave it there because that is a great note to end on. But I can ask a quick one. I'm Kate Shaw, I teach here, but I'll ask a non-long law professor type question. And actually just a follow-up to what Kathy said about the civil. I mean, I gather you're suggesting that at stake here is not just the structure of independent agencies, but the principle of nonpartisanship, objectivity, merit in federal employment. That's obviously true when it comes to the MSPB, but I guess there's a question, should the Supreme Court, in Slaughter and any other sort of related cases, be told that what's at stake here is the civil service and not just the structure of independent agencies? I guess there's danger in some ways in inviting the court to really throw into doubt the entire structure of federal employment. But if that's really what's at stake, tactically, I'm not sure it makes sense to be coy about that. So I guess drawing distinctions between these positions and the 2 million federal workers, should that tactically be what the litigators do, or should we be honest about what this is really about more broadly?
I'll take
Go
that
ahead, Kathy.
quickly. I invite you to reach out to my lead attorney, Neil Katyal, Professor Shaw, and you can let him know your thoughts, as many law professors have been doing around the country. Thank you.
Well, great. Wishing thanks to all of our panel members. Thanks to all of you for coming today. Appreciate the opportunity.